Okay, so good evening and welcome to everybody. Welcome to our regulars. If you're a first timer with us this week, welcome to you as well. My name is Alan Friedman. I'm Vice President of the Australian Jewish Association, and I am your MC again for this evening. Also visible on your screens are David Adler, President of the AJA, as well as our special guest for tonight, Efraim Inbar, who we will introduce formally in a moment. Tonight's topic, of course, is how do we make any sense of the fourth Israeli election? Hopefully Efraim will be able to make some sense out of it. So David and I will chat with Efraim for about 30 minutes and then we'll open up to questions from the audience. Just a reminder that if you want to ask a question, you do need to indicate this to us electronically. And the way to do that is to raise your hand electronically. And if you go to the participants icon at the bottom of the screen, click the little up arrow, you should get another little icon that says raise hand, or if it's not there, just use the green tick or whatever is there just to get our attention. And then we'll put you in the queue and your questions will be taken. The chat function is available as usual, and as usual, I do remind people to please keep to the topic for tonight. Okay, so Professor Efraim Inbar is President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, and he's a Professor of Political Studies at Bar Ilan University. He has had a long list of positions and appointments, such as visiting professor at Georgetown, Johns Hopkins and Boston Universities, a visiting scholar at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, a Manfred Warner NATO Fellow, and a visiting fellow at the London-based International Institute for Strategic Studies. He was president of the Israel Association of International Studies, a member of the Political Strategic Committee of the National Planning Council, chairman of the National Security Curriculum Committee in the Ministry of Education, and a member of the Academic Committee of the IDF History Department. And apart from all that, he has authored 5 books. Efraim is an expert on Israeli strategic doctrine, public opinion on national security issues, US Middle East policy, Israel-Palestinian diplomacy, and Israel-Turkey relations. All of this makes him a good person to talk to and one of our favourite people. So we want to ask him about the fourth Israeli election, and he's also a very good friend of the AJA. Efraim Inbar, welcome back to Zoom Australia. It's nice to have you again.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you, to see some old friends. And hopefully the skies will open and I'll be able to welcome you in Israel, and maybe I'll come and visit you.
Yeah, we'd like to do that.
Now it's easier to get to Australia, by the way, because there are direct flights to Abu Dhabi and very good connections from Abu Dhabi to Australia. So
yes,
that's
okay.
An improvement. Improvement.
Good.
I want to say just a few things about the electoral system, which for many of you sounds very strange. The whole country, of course, we have a proportional system, and each party gets the percentage of Knesset seats according to the votes it gets. The whole country is one constituency. You vote for a party list and you cannot change the list. I know in many countries you can reorder the list. Now in Israel, the voters don't have this privilege. The threshold is 3.25, which is for Knesset seats. About 160,000 votes, maybe a little bit more, which makes entrance into Knesset something feasible for many groups. And actually the system encourages the fragmentation of the Israeli political map. This time we had 13 parties which enter the Knesset. And in my view, it is a responsive system. Basically, many groups can feel that they have a voice in the parliament. Some of them have also a voice in the government. The government is usually a coalition because no party has ever reached the magic number of 61 Knesset seats. So they also always need some partners to rule, which encourages compromises, some kind of moderation. Everybody understands that they cannot get all they want. That's a very important lesson for, a humility lesson for politicians. This also, this type of system also produces greater trust in the system. More people go to vote. The turnout in Israel is relatively high. It's around 70%, plus minus. Among the Jews, it's higher.
Where are you going?
And this is, of course, a sign of trust in the system, in the political system.
In another half an hour, I might be resuming.
David, we need
this system also responsive to many voices. So it encourages pragmatism and compromises. And so far it worked, for many years, it worked well. We have the two major parties, one major party. We are now back to one major party. Yet in the last 2 years, we had 4 elections, which show something is wrong. We cannot build a coalition, a ruling coalition. And we had it in March 2019, September 2019, and again in March 2020 and March 2021. And there are good chances we'll have another one in September or sometime around September. And I would like, first of all, to take a look at the results, because it's all about arithmetics. Again, it's 61 is a magic number. David, can you show the results on the... Okay. This is basically, initially at the top, you see the pro-Netanyahu bloc, which is Likud, the largest party, 30 seats, JISS, the Sephardi ultra-Orthodox, not so ultra, but the leadership is at least ultra-Orthodox, 9. United Torah is, Judaism is Ashkenazi, ultra-Orthodox, and a new party which just entered the Knesset this time, Religious Zionism, which basically aggregates the right-wing parts of modern Zionism, modern Orthodoxy. We have another party afterwards, Yamina, led by Bennett, that during the election campaign and until actually yesterday, sat on the fence. He did not say who's going to support, and actually said, I'm ready to sit with everybody. He has 7 seats. Now, the bloc, the pro-Netanyahu bloc has 52. 52 is not enough. So they need partners from other places. In the second, encircled, with blue around it, we have the anti-Netanyahu bloc. New Hope is a splinter party of from Likud, led by a Likud member, Saar, prominent Likud member. They got 6. Israel Beiteinu, who also is the splinter from Likud some time ago, Lieberman, he was a close confidant of Netanyahu. And they are clearly right-wing parties, but still they don't get along with Netanyahu. We have 2 centrist parties now, Yesh Atid, Lapid, led by Lapid. This is the second largest party, 17 only, and Likud is almost double the Yesh Atid. Blue and White is a party which remained, with Gantz, that entered into a paritatic government with Netanyahu last year after the last elections. They got 8. And now we have the left, Labor, led by Michaeli, 7, Meretz, further to the left, led by Horowitz, and the last party there in this group, which is anti-Netanyahu, is the United Arab List, which is a Arab party that includes nationalists, communists, a communist in the Arab world is not, Arab communist is not exactly a communist like in other parts of the world. And they got 6. Their power was greatly reduced. Last Knesset, they had 15. So, and at the end, we have another list. Ram, that's a new list in a new party in Israeli parliament. This Ram is an Islamist moderate party. It is a party which is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. And some of its formal documents reflect clearly this type of attachment. They are against, formally against Zionism, against the Jewish state. They call it apartheid. But for the past, half a year or so, Abbas, their leader, that's not Abbas of the Palestinian Authority. It's another Abbas who shows some pragmatism and basically says, I'm willing to do business with everybody as long as I get what I want. And what he wants is money. And, government can dispense money. That's not a big problem for a government if it needs. And he wants to serve better his community. And he said openly that he's ready to support a Likud-led government. So he is a potential addition to a Likud-led government. And if we take a look at the numbers, it's again very important, it's 52, plus Yamina 7 is 59. And if Ram joins the party, it seems that Netanyahu has a government. But it ain't so, because religious Zionism objects to have a right-wing government supported by an Arab party, despite the fact that Ram is willing to support the government from outside, meaning they don't want ministerial jobs, they want the money and some maybe parliamentary committees which give out goodies, and they don't want them. So this is the source of the stalemate. Netanyahu doesn't have at this stage a government. Now, of course, the latest news of yesterday is that he was given the opportunity to build a government by the president after consultations with the parties. And again, arithmetics was very important. The 52 Knesset members declared to the president that they recommend Netanyahu to be the prime minister. Yamina supported Bennett to be the prime minister. He has ambitions, he has a big appetite. And from the anti-Bibi, anti-Netanyahu bloc, most parties recommended Lapid, with the exception of New Hope, who didn't recommend anybody, as well as the United Arab List, also didn't recommend anybody. So if you take a look at the numbers, the president actually had no choice but to give Netanyahu a first opportunity to form a government, because the 52 is more than Lapid could have gathered as recommendations. Ram was sitting also on the fence and didn't recommend anybody. And the question that anybody follows Israeli politics is, why can't Netanyahu win an election for the past 2 years? Clearly an election. And after all, he has an excellent record as prime minister. He built a thriving economy due to his efforts already as finance minister. He liberalized the economy and the Israeli economy. for a variety of reasons, is blooming. By the way, yesterday, the government, the Chancellor of the Bank of Israel, presented his report, and Israel is doing very well. Particularly, in comparison to the OECD countries, we are doing much better in terms of national debt, in terms of the workforce, how many people are employed, and exports and everything. We are doing very well. The high-tech export sector is doing very well. So, from an economic aspect, Netanyahu is very good. He's a world-class leader. How many leaders of countries can pick up a phone and call Putin, Modi, or the former president of the United States? He was the one that succeeded to convince the Americans to move their embassy to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is important to the Israelis, very important. Of course, Jews in general have a soft spot for Jerusalem, but Israelis clearly want Jerusalem to be recognized as their capital. Also, he brought the Abraham Accords, which is a tremendous achievement. 4 additional countries, Arab countries, are ready to open diplomatic relations with Israel. Also, if I take a look at polls, over 40% of the Israelis believe that Netanyahu is the best suited to be prime minister. His party gets only 25 seats, which is 25%. So we see a large number of Israelis, despite that they do not vote for Netanyahu, still think he's a good prime minister, and nobody else in the Israeli political spectrum gets any close to Netanyahu as being suitable for prime minister. Everybody agrees he's a good campaigner. He's called in Israel the magician, because he has run very well oiled campaigns with bringing the voters to the voting booth and succeeding in the last days to elicit great support for his party. And finally, if we take a look at the list of parties and their numbers, we have now in the Knesset 72 Knesset members that are right-wing, parts of the right-wing parties. Take a look, it's Likud, JISS, United Torah, Religious Zionism, Yamina, New Hope, and Israel Beitenu, all of them. It's 52, plus 7 is 59, plus 6 is 65, plus 7, 72. 72 Knesset members can be easily defined as right-wing. So what happened? I'll say a few words about the election campaign. Of course, one reason, you can take it off now, one reason for Likud not doing better or Netanyahu not doing better is the fragmentation of the right-wing bloc. We have 2 new right-wing parties that have attracted some of the Likud voters, which is Religious Zionism, to the right of Likud, and New Hope, led by Saar, which is more or less Likud B. There is no real difference in ideology or in anything, but personalities in the composition of New Hope. And it seems that, according to analysis, post-election analysis, that Saar took about 3 seats from Likud. He got double 6, but 3 seats seem to have come from Likud voters. Also, there was a rather low turnout in the recent elections, lower than the previous one. And again, post-election analysis indicates that about 300,000 voters in Likud concentrations, urban Likud concentrations, didn't vote. They got tired of voting so often. So again, 300,000 votes is maybe 6, maybe more of of seats in the Knesset. He got, however, Netanyahu, and this is remarkable, votes from the Arab sector. At least one Knesset seat came due to the votes of Arabs. He is called in the Arab sector Abu Yair. Abu is father in Arabic. This is how people are, and Yair is his son. You know, the name of many Arabs is after the Abu of his first-born son. So Abu Yair was, he campaigned heavily in the Arab sector, and he was successful in getting one seat. And I think also to make the United Arab List less attractive to the Arab voters. And those are, the technical reasons. But I think the main reason for the failure of Netanyahu to win an election is that he has become, over the years, a polarizing figure in Israeli society and politics. He has created a lot of antagonism. He has, antagonistic style, and many people are not indifferent to him. They either like him or hate him. And, my colleagues in the academia, I'm surprised, how much they hate him. He's, an intelligent guy, well-educated, very successful. Still, they hate him. But his family doesn't help him. Sarah is bad news, his wife. I'm not sure exactly why. I don't know her well. I once, sat next to her, and I had to, during the Netanyahu two-state speech, at Bar Ilan, I sat next to her, and she was very nice. But my wife doesn't like her, and I think there are many women that, have something against her, and it's a mystery. I don't know what, and maybe the women in the audience would understand. I don't. He evokes this antipathy. A politician should get votes, but also should people that don't like him to put them to sleep. No, he doesn't. Netanyahu evokes a lot of feelings against him. The secondary reason, which I have no proof, but I suspect that it is correct for him not winning this election, and also seeing a lower turnout, is that he headed a national unity government for the past year that collapsed, and he is being blamed for it. I think, a fair assessment of his record with this government. And his partner to the government, Gantz, is seen as a political novice with no experience that has been abused by the clever, sophisticated Netanyahu. And people didn't like it. First of all, the Israelis like national unity governments. We had several national unity governments which were popular. And also, Netanyahu's behavior toward this political novice, despite the fact that he's a general, he was the head of the Israeli army, chief of staff, is seen as not nice. You don't do things like, I have a friend actually that he's right wing, but he voted for Gantz, and he said, somebody should vote for a nice guy. He's a nice guy, and he didn't deserve, what he got from Netanyahu. So this is the secondary. What's next? Of course, we see now Netanyahu looking for defectors. And he, of course, is trying to court Ram, and I don't think it will be too difficult to bring them in for the right amount of money. And of course, he can dispense easily money that doesn't belong to him. it's a national budget, so it's not such a difficult job to do. As I mentioned, the religious Zionists don't want to be part of such a deal, although what transpires now is that the strategy of Netanyahu is to get a government with outside support of Ram, of the Islamist party, as well as the outside support of religious Zionism, which doesn't want to be part of a deal with the Islamists. And he actually needs a government for one day, because he wants to get rid of, he is now the head of an interim government that Gantz is part of it. And Gantz has a veto power over what's happening in the government. He needs one day government to become the prime minister of a new interim government. And this, of course, will free him of the burden of dividing power with Gantz. And he may go to a fifth election. But even if this plan works, we still have a stalemate because it's not clear that a minority government supported from two outside forces that are so separate, in their ideology, in their political behavior, it's not going to work. At the same time, Lapid is also looking for defectors. He's trying to convince Bennett not to join Netanyahu and maybe to attract other defectors. One potential defector is United Torah, the Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox, who are, for a variety of reasons, are not that satisfied with Netanyahu. And, if they can get more from a Lapid government, they may join. But the numbers do not always, work out. Shas can also, the Haredi are not that different from the Islamists, and they are ready to get money from anybody that offers, part of the pork barrel. In the initial stage of the game, Netanyahu won. He got the recommendation from the Knesset members, and President Rivlin nominated him to be the first to form a government. But now we have a Knesset. A new Knesset was convened, and of course, you have to choose, heads of committees or the chair of the Knesset, and we have a stalemate now. And if the stalemate will, evaporate, and we'll see basically who is winning this game. Also, the opposition to Netanyahu has plans to legislate in the new Knesset, if they have the magic number, a new law, not allowing a candidate that has been indicted to form a government. So far, the fact that the prime minister has been indicted and his trial has started does not affect his capability by law to run the government. This is a law. This was also confirmed by the Supreme Court of Justice. So as long as he's prime minister, Netanyahu can drag the trial until a final decision is Supreme Court. And he's not going, in contrast to ministers that once indicted, they have to resign. A prime minister doesn't have to resign. So we'll see what happens in the next days. And I want to end maybe with some general comments. First of all, we have to realize that the last 4 elections were about Netanyahu. Is he suitable? Is he fit to be prime minister? And no other issues were at stake. No Iran. There was no debate over the policy toward Iran. No debate what to do about the Palestinians. No debate if the economic policies are fine or not. All this disappeared. Biden, what should we do about Biden? But still, the government made a decision to start working with the new administration, and I think most Israelis feel comfortable with this decision. So there was no issues to be debated. And this clearly shows that there is huge consensus in the country on almost everything, except the prime minister. But so there is a base for social cohesion in the country, despite the image that is portrayed of being a divided country and a country that fights with each other. That's not true. We fight over who's the prime minister. Also, it's clear that the right-wing bloc is becoming stronger. Now we have 72 seats. I think this affects also what Israelis expect of their government. Basically, in foreign policy to continue the current approach, and also to fix the judicial system. What happened in recent years, there was a greater mistrust, less confidence in the judicial system, particularly the Supreme Court of Justice. I think they earned it because they interfere in things which many Israelis believe they should not interfere, issues that should be decided by the legislation or by society. So whatever government will have, if we'll have one, this will be what they'll be doing. We have many candidates this time, many more candidates for prime minister. Are we moving into more personalized politics? Maybe. It definitely shows that we have many politicians with big appetite to be prime minister, big ego. This shouldn't surprise us. Politicians have big ego. But, they want to be not every politician wants to be prime minister. The Likud is also the largest party. If we'll have to, a prime minister will come definitely from Likud. And we may see also mergers. The Likud has traditionally accepted parties from outside in order to strengthen its power. And it's also willing to accept renegades, like Saar. Saar left the party. Of course, he got not the nicest words in the world, but if he says, mea culpa, I'm coming home, he'll be greeted, and we have already, Zev Elkin was in Kadima, Tzachi Hanegbi was in Kadima, and they were accepted back. So Kachlon also. So, and there are rumors that Netanyahu is offering Bennett to become part of the party. Not everybody likes the idea in the Likud, but if Netanyahu will decide, he has a chance to pass it. Now, finally, a word about the Ram phenomenon, which in my view is a positive development. Basically, we see part of the Arab sector in Israeli society willing to play the Israeli political game. Until today, they were outsiders. And basically what they want, they may have a hidden agenda, but they speak softly now. They want to improve the housing, they want to improve police enforcement in their communities. All what they are saying seem to be legitimate concerns that any government, should be willing to negotiate, over the sums of money. So, and this is an opportunity maybe to integrate part of the Arab sector. Definitely, the Ram voters, 4 seats, didn't come only from Islamists. Part of the voters of Ram are Islamists. But a part, and I don't know the exact numbers, are Arabs that are fed up with a nationalist agenda of the other Arab party and want to take care of themselves and to be part of Israeli society. And don't forget that the Arabs in Israel, of course, are attentive to what's happening in the rest of the Arab world. And the rest of the Arab world doesn't look very enticing. It's war, not everybody is Kuwait or Abu Dhabi. It's Syria, it's Yemen, it's Libya, so Iraq. So life in the Arab world is not so good. And unquestionably, the best place for an Arab to live and to enjoy human rights and a good standard of living is Israel. And not everybody is, stupid and doesn't understand it. So this is an opportunity. It may create some problems with our Arab neighbors that are fighting the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, of course, Saudi Arabia, are all very much against the Muslim Brotherhood. So if it will happen, I don't know if this is what will happen, if Ram will be part of, somehow, of an Israeli government, we have to do some explaining to our neighbors. But there is no free lunch.
Efraim, thank you. It's a very thorough summary you've given us. It's fantastic. We'll go to questions. So as usual, I will remind everybody to please keep your questions brief. And I'll also ask people to ask one question. Perhaps if everybody asks double-barreled questions, we won't get through everybody. So I've got Jeff, Dennis, Ron, Debbie, Michael, and I think somebody else has just put up their hand. So let's start with Jeff. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Shalom, Professor. If Israel is not careful, pretty soon they'll overtake Italy as having the most government since the 1940s. I think they're up to about 65 elections. So what I suggest the solution would be to have a substantial penalty to any party that doesn't achieve 15% of the popular vote. How about that?
You see, a high threshold is excluding large parts of the population. It will exclude, of course, Haredi parties. It may exclude the Arab parties. Of course, they may unite and afterwards part away after the elections. I don't think a proportional system with 15% threshold is a healthy system. We tried a different system by voting directly for prime minister, and this was a disaster because we voted for a prime minister, but there was such fragmentation of the political map that they couldn't really build a coalition, a stable coalition. And this led, if you remember, to the dissolution of Barak government in 2000. So, I don't want to be a piggy pig. How do you call it? A piggy pig, a pig. There are other suggestions to have a mixed proportional and constituencies, several constituencies. We may try that, but again, the issue is personal, as I see it. It's Netanyahu, and if Netanyahu goes or decides to resign or decides to be president, we have a government in 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's what it boils down to. Thanks, Jeff. Dennis, your turn. Please unmute yourself.
Good evening, Professor. Thank you very much for your analysis. Look, the Israelis must be totally sick and tired of going to the polls again and again. And if there is no resolution and there's still this fragmentation.
By the way, we get a free day. It's a free day.
Yeah,
so there is some compensation.
Well, you can always have another hug instead. Now, the issue is that the electoral system is such that it creates this instability because it's based on one electorate with proportional representation. Other countries have managed to work on a preferential system or a system of electorates. And so my question is, what would it take for Israel to change the voting system or the electoral system so that you get more stability? Because the whole world is watching this and laughing, and the longer it goes, the fewer people are going to be drawn to the polls. They're going to get tired.
I agree, it is a problem, and we see a lower turnout this time than the previous election. We may see after this election or after the next one a movement towards the change of, to experiment a different system. And we may see, but you need for that a majority in the Knesset. And of course, there is an inbuilt anti-change attitude in the Knesset, because the small parties want to survive an election. So it's not going to be easy.
No. Okay, Ron, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good evening, Professor Inbar. I wanted to ask you a question. What would happen if Netanyahu became president, which would also possibly make him an unofficial foreign minister? Do you think that could happen?
I have my doubts, primarily because it seems that Netanyahu doesn't want to be president, or doesn't want to go that way, which will provide him immunity, actually. Of course, he can get, there will be a lot of Knesset members. The Knesset votes, elects the president. There will be a lot of MKs that will gladly promise to vote for him as president to get rid of him. But there is a slight problem, the ballot is secret. So, or even if it's not secret, will they vote for him? And here, one clear characteristic of Netanyahu is that he trusts very few people. He doesn't, he's not a trusting person. And so will he take this gamble? No. He seems to prefer to be in the prime minister seat, which allows him to maneuver. And don't forget that Netanyahu seriously believes, like more than 40% of the Israeli population, that he's the best suited to be prime minister for Israel. So why should he leave this job if so many people think that he's doing a good job?
Yeah. Okay, we've got Debbie, Michael, and Joseph. So Debbie, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi. Everyone has a date when they eventually retire or leave office. What you partly answered this question, but how do you think it would play out when that eventually happens with Netanyahu?
Well, there is nobody that has no replacement, so we'll find somebody else that will be prime minister. We shouldn't forget that Netanyahu, in his first stint as prime minister, was terrible, but he had a learning curve, and he did very well in his homework, and he became a very successful prime minister. So we'll have somebody else, but I don't think he, and particularly not his wife, are in a hurry to retire.
Okay. Michael, your turn.
There is some attitudes that young people are better. No, I have white hair. I think that white hair is okay, and experience.
Just before we go to Michael Efraim, does Netanyahu have more of a vote with any particular age group? Is it the older people that like him and not the younger people?
No, the older actually don't like him because they are Mapai, they are Labour. The younger people are, he gets more, I don't know now exact numbers, but it's quite, it seems that he's doing better among younger and females.
Right.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
now maybe less, but once he was a very attractive man. There were many women around him, and this, Sarah didn't like it, so drove her crazy.
That's yeah, that's
crazy.
Because I mean, around the world, the young people are rebelling against the sort of the middle-aged male leaders of countries, aren't they? You know, they're sort of fighting back against all of this, and yet in Israel, it's interesting. It seems to not be the case.
We are smarter.
Okay, all right, Michael. Let's go to you. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. Michael?
It's not unmuting. Might do Joseph first.
Okay, Michael, while you're working out what to do, it's the mute button's on the bottom left-hand corner. Let's go to Joseph. So Joseph, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good evening. Are you able to hear me? Because I've had trouble in the past. Yeah, okay, great. In the recent American election, the media, the so-called mainstream media and the social media were so anti-Trump, it was disgusting. What is the media doing in Israel? Are they for or against? Are they evenly divided?
Well, the media in Israel, just like the academia, is leaning toward the left. But there are many, right-wing voices and right-wing newspapers. The largest Israeli newspaper, Israel Hayom, is a right-wing newspaper. So there are a variety of voices. Actually, Netanyahu is very adept at working the social media. So it's a mixed bag, basically.
Okay, thank you. Reuven and then Moish. So Reuven, please unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm muted. Professor Efraim Inbar, what do you think on Pesach, that's the birth of our nation, we become a fully fledged nation, the last day of Moish's life, when he declares today you have a fully fledged nation, but as a nation, our political affiliation was constitutional monarchy. Hashem is the monarch, Torah is our constitution. I won't go into the details, but what do you see about the feeling that maybe all these elections, one after the other, is pointing, listen, this is not our political system. Our political system is constitutional monarchy. Time for Mashiach to come now. That'll resolve the problem.
Okay. Do you want to answer that?
Well, first of all, theologically, I'm not sure you are correct. You know, there is a strong Republican tradition in Judaism. After all, Prophet Shmuel didn't want to anoint a king, and eventually God gave in, and so you have Abarbanel, again, anti-royal, source, but Jews are stiff-necked people. Moses, was close to be a king, omnipotent, with God behind him, and still people rebelled against him. So, no, I think that having any authoritarian system is not suitable for the Jews. By the way, the Jewish tradition has always been very pluralistic. The Jewish communities were always several people were running the show. We have the three, I don't want to go into a long lecture about Jewish tradition, but we have the three crowns, the rabbinical crowns, the prophetic crowns, and the priesthood. So always it was a triumvirate, and so it's I totally reject the notions that our tradition bestows upon us an autocratic royal system.
Yeah. Okay. I've got Moish.
We are not built for them.
Moish and then Morris. So Moish, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay. Okay. Hi, Efraim. How are you? Can you hear me? Okay. This is the first conversation I think I've heard in 12 months, political or otherwise, that hasn't mentioned COVID or the vaccines. And I'm just wondering, in Israel, where we read that over half the population has been vaccinated and there's vaccine passports and everything, I wonder, how is it that the Israeli population accepts such a, heavy-handed approach, and has there been any resistance? And also, is this played into the election in any way for Netanyahu?
Actually, this is a very good question. He managed to be among the first to make huge orders for the vaccines. He paid a lot. I think it's worth it. And this is not taken, fully to his credit. I think that the government approach was not heavy-handed. There were lines for getting vaccine. And if you take a look at The Economist for the past 2 months, we feature there as best nation in the world, freeing ourselves of COVID-19. And I think that this is partly his achievement. Of course, the delivery system is part of our social welfare system. But still, it didn't help him in winning the election, despite this remarkable. We are the best in the world, unquestionably, in terms of, I don't know the exact numbers, maybe 80% have at least one shot and 60% the 2 shots. And people talk here already about maybe we have immunity herd, and we may in May, next month, vaccinate also the children until age of 12. So all this, I must say, it's Netanyahu's credit, and still it doesn't help him. People take it maybe for granted. This is what the government's supposed to do for us. We should be the best.
Yes. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Morris, that's you. So please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Professor Inbar. I read an article in the last few days. I can't recall the author. It might have been from the Balagan Center, basically saying, notwithstanding that you've identified that there are 71 seats for the right, it basically implied that if Bibi does a deal with Ram, with Abbas, that it sets a precedent and potentially will be a long-term disaster for Likud and the right, because in the future, the left will do deal after deal with the joint list and everything. Your thoughts on that?
Of course, Netanyahu made a precedent in legitimizing participation of Arab lists. And this will provide to some extent a cautious stamp also for the United Arab List. However, there is a big difference between the United Arab List and the Islamist, more pragmatic approach. As United Arab List members refuse, to swear allegiance to the State of Israel. They have much more nationalistic views on the Palestinian issue, and there is a difference between the two movements. Generally, I do not favor exclusionary policies. You cannot exclude from politics 20% of the Israeli population. It will be better off you can integrate them. Of course, not compromise the Jewish character of the state. But if they accept, certain rules, I have less panic. I think this is spreading panic. Also, some people said, we'll be like Lebanon. That's nonsense. No.
Okay. All right. That might be a good place to just wrap up the questions for this evening. Ephraim, your knowledge and insight is amazing. We love having you on our Zoom sessions. I've put your website address up on the chat, so people are welcome to visit the website. And if anybody wants to donate, I'm sure you wouldn't object. So thank you.
You are welcome to join our email list.
Okay. Thank you again, Ephraim. I'll just hand back to David and he can do a little bit of a final close.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ephraim, for your insight, wisdom, and briefing that you've given us this evening. I do want to acknowledge that this evening, Australia time, begins the Holocaust Remembrance Day. If you go to our Facebook page in about half an hour, you will see a post in dedication to that. Perhaps the most important segment is tomorrow in Israel, 10 a.m., which corresponds to 5 p.m. here. They have the sirens and the moment of silence. So if you want to sort of join hands across the sea with our brethren in Israel, set an alarm for about 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in Sydney and Melbourne. Take a moment or two aside and just to commemorate the 6 million that died in the Holocaust. And finally, well, actually two finals. I promised that we could preview the Spectator magazine cover, which will be published online tomorrow. And this is a commentary on the Labor Party recognition of Palestine. You can see here, it says David Adler on ALP recognising Palestine. Now, you mightn't be able to read that text, but on the left-hand side, we have figures of Penny Wong, Anthony Albanese and Bob Carr, and they're saying, we're shouting our support for Palestine from the rooftops. And on the other building, throwing homosexuals off the roof, are the Islamists saying, so are we. So this is a very clever commentary attacking the actual Labor values as being hypocritical in their recognition of Palestine. That'll be online tomorrow. It'll be sent to subscribers and in the newsagents a day or two later. And the final thing to do, as we always do, is...
just before you do that, David, I'll just mention, because you didn't mention, David's got an article in this coming Spectator magazine. David's becoming quite a feature writer for Spectator, and he does it very well. And so that's the reason for that cover story. So well worth. I've actually seen the article. We got a sneak preview. It's a terrific article. Well worth buying the Spectator and having a look at it. So I'll just mention that to everybody.
As usual, these are the things we want you to do to support HAA. If you're not yet on the email list, you can go and subscribe at our website, jewishassociation.org.au, for zero cost. And anyone who subscribes by tomorrow lunchtime will receive via email a copy of that article and the cover of the Spectator magazine, as well as all the other usual benefits. Like and follow the Facebook page where you get the news and views. And of course, if you're able to do so, apply for membership. It's only $25. Donations are also welcome. So we will make an announcement about what's happening next week. We had a speaker lined up and there are some personal issues that have intervened. So we're not going to announce that tonight, but we'll send an email out in the next day or two concerning the event next week. So Alan, back to you for the final close.
Good, thanks David. Thanks everybody, and thanks again Ephraim. It's wonderful to see you again. And thanks to all the people that joined. You really make our sessions special. Until next week, when we'll have more information coming through, we look forward to joining you all again next week. So for now, it's good evening to you all. Bye for now.